Well, Pastor Doug Wilson goes on the Young Turks with Cenk to be interviewed about Christian nationalism and yah blah blah whatever kind of stuff. But the interesting part was when Cenk or King, however you say that guy's name, from the Young Turks starts asking him about husband and wife roles here. Now, Doug Wilson, there is no pastor in America who is more well known for biblical Christian patriarchy than Doug Wilson. At least I don't know of any that are more well known than Doug Wilson as far as when it comes to Christian patriarchy. Here's the guy. And I was very surprised with his answers. Like, this is Mr. Christian patriarchy and pretty soft. So let's get to it here, though. Hey, if you're liking this content, give me a like, subscribe, give me a comment below. I know it's been a little while since I posted. I got to get back to it. Been a little sick. Here we go.
I'm not asking if women should be equal because men and women are biologically different. And so equal is too vague a word. So let me ask more specifically, should women have equal rights to men?
Uh-oh. Whoa. Equal rights. Here we go. All right.
Yes, if you're talking about women should have the right to fair trial, the right to keep and bear arms, the right to free speech, the right habeas corpus. All women should have all the same rights at that level that men do. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Do they have a right to say no to their husband's sexual?
Whoa. Whoa. Say no. Say no, 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 no. Say no. Do they have the right to say no? Now, you would think Pastor Doug Wilson would say, well, according to 1 Corinthians chapter 7, neither partner, husband or wife, is to deprive them their spouse. Well, I'm going to stop saying partner. That's gay language. Let me say their spouse. Neither spouse can deprive them except for prayer time. Right? That's what 1 Corinthians clearly says. So that is the biblical example set forth. Let's see. Pastor Doug, we're going to come through.
Yes. If the question is, do I believe that marital rape is okay? No, it's not okay.
No, that wasn't the question, Pastor Doug. That wasn't the question. I never heard that question at all. What I heard, I think everybody heard the question, and it had nothing to do with that. But okay.
Not at all.
Oh, okay. All right, good.
There are people out there lying about me on that point, but that's so I'm glad. Thanks for the opportunity to say no. Marital rape is bad.
Okay, now
I don't even know what that actually means. Like I really don't. Like, marriage is the only legal contract where sexual union happens. It's the only one. It's the only one where you pledge, like, yes, this is in a way, it is a sexual contract between a husband and a wife. And we are going to bring forth children from this marriage, this covenant, this union, this contract that has been formed. I don't even know, like, in some countries, I think it was Italy, it was at one time, like not that long ago either. We're not talking like 1700s, but we're talking like at one time recently, it was illegal for a spouse to say no to their husband or wife. I think it was really wives to say no to their husbands, but I'm not sure how exactly that law was written. Somebody actually looked that up and give me a comment below on that one. But that's the deal. This is the only partnership, the only covenant, the only thing where the sexual union is in view. So how can that even be a thing? I don't know. I'm still confused on that. Well, blah blah. Anyway, let's go on.
I read, and so we have you on here, so that's why we get to ask you and have this conversation, that you were okay with spousal spanking, abuse. There's different words that you could put to it.
No.
Yes.
Spousal spanking. Oh my God. Now abuse. Yeah. I mean, I guess we'd have to be clear on that because obviously spousal abuse can be anything. anything. It can be emotional abuse, spiritual abuse, financial abuse, blah, blah, blah. What's that mean? You did something that I don't like, and therefore I'm abused. But I like this question about spousal spanking. I want to see what Doug, what what is this? You get a good spanking, if that, let's go to it.
Yes or no?
Absolutely not.
So no,
Absolutely not.
like not allowed to hit your wife at all.
Not allowed to hit your wife. So as a pastor, if I had a parishioner who slugged his wife, hit his wife, or tried to spank his wife, or was applying corporal punishment to his.
Ooh, okay. So now if Doug had a parishioner who spanked his wife, she was a naughty girl. She did something that he said, "Hey, you shouldn't do that," and he gave her 5 spankings. Pop, 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 pop. What would he do in the pastorate? Let's see.
His wife, call the cops, call the pastor.
Oh,
Okay.
whoa. Okay. All right. So if a husband gives a spanking to his wife because she was a naughty girl. Now, let me be clear. Let me be clear here. Let me be clear here. I am not saying that you should do this. Just let me be clear, okay? Is everybody looking out there? Like, no, I'm not saying you should do this. I'm just saying if a husband would, as he does his children, he disciplines the children, he disciplines his wife with 5 spankings on the rear end. Doug says you call the police and you call the pastor if that happens. That's interesting. That's really interesting. I wonder if we would take the same approach to the children then. To the children, do we give if a father gives a good pop 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 to his children, do we call the police and do we call the pastor as well? If not, if we don't do that, then I would say, then why? Here's if this is Mr. Christian Patriarchy, why then would we call the police if a husband, a well-meaning husband, who disciplines his wife, because Doug would say he has authority in his home. He has been given authority in his home by God. His wife and his children are to be in submission to his authority as he is in submission to God. Now, if he has that authority and he gives his children spankings as discipline and then he gives his wife spankings, I would say, please give me chapter and verse in the scripture where you would bring in the civil magistrate and the elders if a husband decided that his wife needed a spanking on the rear end. I don't know. Like, do you see the parallel there? Does anybody give me a comment below? Does anybody see the parallel here? I am not saying you should do this. Let me reiterate that one more time. I'm not saying you should do this. I'm just saying, where do we get the logic there? Where do we get the logic? If one is 100% okay and one is punishable by the civil magistrate to call the police. Just wondering. Here we go.
I read about this. I never heard of this before. Blanket theory, where there's apparently a phenomenon. I don't think you guys preach it, but I'm curious whether you agree with it or not. Because there's some question as to whether you guys do. And again, that's why we have you on here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that if a baby walks away from a blanket, you spank it, and corporal punishment to train the baby. Are you in favor of that or no?
No.
No.
So I do believe that toddlers, little kids, need to be disciplined and corrected and so forth. But I've never heard of this blanket theory that you're talking about. But let's say I do believe that if a toddler is told to take his nap and he gets up, I don't have any objection to godly, loving corporal punishment for sensible infractions that are sensibly applied, the household rules. But
now that's a good point. He doesn't have any issue with corporal punishment, meaning a spanking on the bottom for violations of what the father thinks is right and good in the home. But now this is interesting. I'm not saying you should do this again, but if the husband, the father, as the leader who has authority in his home, if he would give his wife a spanking, call the police and call the pastor. Okay. Does anybody see kind of That what's going on there? I don't know. I'm a little confused here. Let's keep going.
I also believe the dictatorial parents who can mistreat their kids that way and are just awful that way. That'd be terrible.
Okay, so I've always wondered about that because I'm not in favor of corporal punishment. But where's the line for you? So,
I don't even think Cenk has kids. Actually, let me look that up here real quick. Oh, scratch that. I guess he does have two kids. All right, never mind.
you can hit your kid. How much can you hit your kid?
What I teach people is that it should sting, but not damage.
So you're going to need people to use good judgment on sting, but not damage.
Yeah, correct.
You see how sometimes people might not have good judgment on that.
Oh,
Well, like anything in parenting, Cenk, yeah, you have to use good judgment. If you're a retard, then there's no amount of instruction you can give someone. And then I say, oh, that means I can literally bludgeon my kids to death. Like, no, that's not what anyone has said here. Like, hello.
oh, I know. Yeah, and when that happens, when parents abuse their children or overdo it with corporal punishment and they beat up their kids, there are few things in the world that are sadder than that. And Jesus said that if you stumble one of these little ones, it'd be better for a millstone to be tied around your neck and you thrown in the depths of the sea.
Actually, one thing just spitballing here. One thing I think is sadder is a child that was given no discipline and no instruction as he grew up. I see a lot of those kids, and I don't know. I mean, I am not advocating for someone stepping over the line, and we know that what that is and whatnot. I'm not advocating for that, but just say, yeah, I've never seen anything worse. Well, I mean, I've seen some kids that are like, man, they need discipline so bad. In fact, the scripture says, if we want to go back to the scripture in Proverbs, that the father who fails to discipline his son hates his son, right? So if you hate your son, it doesn't say you'll beat him, you'll abuse him, blah blah blah. Now that's bad. Obviously, that's bad. But it says if you hate your son, you'll fail to discipline him. I think that's worse. Really, I do. Anyway, let's move on.
It's awful to abuse a kid.
Okay, so should a woman listen to her husband inside a marriage?
Oh, now, Doug, should a woman listen to her husband? Easy question. This is just yes or no. Easy question. Should a woman listen to her husband? Okay. It couldn't get any easier than this. Here, we're just going to serve it up. Should we know what scripture says? Everybody knows. Mr. Biblical Patriarchy. Should a woman listen to her husband? What's Doug say?
Inside of marriage?
Yeah.
Would he listen to her husband?
Yeah, they obey his commands, directives.
Yeah, that question was pretty clear. I don't. Yeah, I mean, I heard that loud and clear.
Yeah, when I conduct a marriage ceremony, the vows are traditional vows.
Doug, we just needed yes or no. We don't need to talk about vows, but okay, we just needed a yes or no. But okay, let's keep going.
And the bride promises to love, honor, and obey, and the husband does not vow to obey his wife. The wife vows to obey her husband. That said,
wait a minute, hold on. Before he goes further, the question was, should a wife listen to her husband? That should be the easiest question to answer ever. Yes. Yes, even if you're in a complete egalitarian marriage. Should a wife listen to her husband? Well, obviously, why else would you be his wife? Who on earth would even a dyed blue-haired feminist, if they said, well, should a wife listen to their husband? I think even they would say, well, yeah, she doesn't have to do what he says, but of course she should listen to her husband. So yes, okay, emphatic yes, a wife should listen to her husband. Now Doug is going to obey, but now he's going to qualify it. Well, he should have, but let's qualify the obey.
And I believe I'm a Christian Bible guy. The Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 11 and in Ephesians 5 teaches that the husband is the head of the wife as Christ is the head of the church. So I believe that a wife should be submissive and sweet toward her husband, and the husband should be authoritative and self-sacrificial on behalf of his wife.
He should be authoritative unless the wife is out of line and he chooses to discipline her with a spanking on the rear end. Then, if he does that, he should be authoritative. But if he does that, call the police and call the pastor. Okay. All right. I'm not saying you should do that. I'm just saying logically, where are we at with this logically?
And so when it comes down to some decision where the husband and wife, let's say a job offer, or are we going to move to a different state or something like that? Yep. Let's say a husband and wife can't come to an agreement. They go back and forth. And the decision has to be made. The deadline is tomorrow. Then I think the husband is the one who makes the decision, taking his wife's input fully into account. And sometimes he would decide the way he thinks that they should go. And sometimes he would defer to his wife, but he makes the decision. And if he makes a decision that goes contrary to her wishes, she should be submissive and obey. She should be a sweetheart about it. Yes.
Okay. Okay. I guess that is. So the question originally was, should a wife listen to her husband? Doug says, yes, we have in the vows obey. And then he goes on to describe the boilerplate position of complementarianism, which is the wife pretty much gets her way 99% of the time. But when there's a big decision, Doug just laid it out. When there's a big decision, like a job change, and after months and months and months of deliberation, at least weeks, the husband is not equipped well enough to persuade his wife to his position, then and only then can he, because the decision has to be made now. We've come to the deadline. I have failed to adequately persuade you because I was not trained in my biblical husband class on how to effectively persuade my wife to positions that I have. Then and only then can he take his authority and make the decision for him and the wife if she doesn't want to do it. And she then finally, after months of deliberation, then she should submit sweetly and happily to his position. My question for the audience out there today, if you've made it this far into my video and my rants, if you made it this far, my question is that biblical submission? No, it's not. That is not biblical submission. Biblical submission would be the husband says, wife, I'm going to explain to you why I believe this is the best decision for us to make. Let me have your input. He takes her input and he says, okay, I appreciate that input and we're going to do this. And she says, hubby, I love you. I'll submit to you in whatever you want to do because I'm a sub to your mission, whatever that mission is, and let's go. And I'll happily do it. This month of deliberation and blah, 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 that's nonsense. Complete nonsense. Let's go on now.
You see how that sounds convenient? Because if it was reversed and my wife came to me and said, oh, I've got this great book and it says that you should be submissive to me and I should get to decide all these things, I'm not sure I'd rock with that.
Sure, but
Cenk, you're an atheist, and so your marriage, I guess, is egalitarian, and so you just have a two-headed monster of leadership. People just vying for position, blah blah blah, and you will probably end up divorced at some point in your life. Statistics say, like, I don't have much doubt about that. I don't want you to get divorced. I'm just saying, like that. That's probably the way you're going to go. That's how it is. Sorry.
You don't want someone suddenly springing this on you 15 years in marriage. But in our community, what we're talking about are dedicated Christians who have been taught the Bible, who've grown up learning the Bible, reading the Bible. And so when a bride and groom come to the ceremony, they are both equally committed to this way of doing things.
What if it turns out a little bit differently? Because I know back in the day, my parents told me stories about in Turkey, they used to have arranged marriages, and then in the beginning, everybody agrees, and and the man is firmly in charge usually, especially back in the day, right? But then it turns out that the guy's not such a good guy, right?
Right.
And so is she just supposed to go, well, sad day for me? And that could be in a non-arranged marriage too. A lot of people fall in love and they want to, and then it turns out it's not quite what they expected.
Ooh, good question by Cenk to Doug. Now remember, Doug is Mr. Christian Patriarchy here, and I like Doug. Good softball question. Should a wife submit and obey a husband who's not that good of a decision maker, who maybe he's not Mr. Awesome, IQ is below 100, not all that smart? Should she still, and he doesn't love her the way she wants to be loved? He gives her chocolates and flowers on a regular basis, persuades her the way that she wants to be persuaded and led, blah, 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 blah. Should she, I think Cenk's saying, should she submit to him still? Doug, what's the verdict?
So what is she supposed to do there?
If it becomes abusive, if it's simply an unhappy marriage, then you provide counseling and as much help as you can. But if it turns toxic, where he's beating her up or threatening her life or threatening the kids or that sort of thing, I've been in more than one situation where.
Hold on a second. That wasn't the question, Doug. That wasn't the question. The question was, should a wife submit to a husband who is a little bit of a dunderhead, who he isn't Mr. CEO making awesome decisions and rocking and rolling and rolling and rocking. He's snapping necks and writing checks, Should she submit to just the average husband who maybe he makes mistakes? That, I believe, was the question. In an arranged marriage, the answer is obviously yes. What does Doug do? He immediately goes to, well, if he's abusive and the marriage is toxic, I don't know if he said no yet. Come on, man. These are simple, easy questions. Like, what?
We've helped a wife get out.
Okay. But if he's not hitting her, sad day. He's going to move you to Alaska. He wants you to work, not work. You want to be an artist. He wants you to be something else. You just got to listen to the husband. Suck it.
So Cenk, this is interesting. Cenk asked a very simple question. Okay. Yes or no? And even Doug has to go to, well, I mean, if he's toxic and abusive and blah, blah, blah. It's like I'm talking to a Christian feminist here. Well, that wasn't the question. The question. Oh my goodness. The question was, should she submit to the average guy who maybe doesn't make the greatest decisions and he isn't all that romantic and she's not really that in love with him? Should she still submit to him? That, I believe, was Cenk's honest question. Good question. These are actually good questions for a man who is into Christian patriarchy. Cenk brings it back again. Okay, yeah, but should she, well, let's say it's not abuse. Should she submit to him? Doug, please, we're serving it up to you. Please, just answer yes or no, please.
Well, let's put it this way. This is a fallen world. And when two sinners marry each other, each one has the full capacity to make the other one miserable.
Yeah, I suppose they do. But then, in my secular world, I'd say, well, it doesn't seem like it's working out. We go on our separate ways and we wish it hadn't been, but it's, we're not aligned. So we're going to get a divorce.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm still waiting for the answer to the question. I didn't hear the answer to that. Are we going to answer? Yes or no? Yes or no? Should she submit and happily comply with this husband? Okay.
In a Christian nation, would a divorce be allowed in that circumstance or no?
Yes, Jesus teaches that.
What? Yes. Wait a minute. Hold on. Time out. Hold the phone. Mr. Christian Patriarchy says yes, a divorce would be allowed in that situation if a wife got married and she just really doesn't like her husband. She doesn't like the way that he leads her. She doesn't like the decisions he makes. He wants to go to Alaska and she doesn't want to go. Doug Wilson literally just said, yeah, we would allow for divorce in that. What? What? Now, okay, hold on a second. Maybe I'm jumping to conclusion. Maybe he's saying in a Christian nation, not for this question specifically, but in a Christian nation, we would allow for divorce in gen. There would be an allowance for it. Maybe he's not speaking, but this is the situation that Cenk is just presenting here. Let's be clear. This is the situation he's just presenting to us. Let's go on.
Divorce is lawful when there's been adultery, when there's been an infidelity. And the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians teaches that divorce is permissible on grounds of desertion. So desertion and infidelity would be the two main criteria.
Now, just to note, my pastor just spoke on this. It's desertion of an unbelieving spouse. It's not two believing spouses, and it's desertion by an unbelieving spouse. We need to qualify that. That's clearly taught in 1 Corinthians. Anyway, just a little note there.
That would justify biblical divorce.
But if a wife is just miserable because the husband's just making terrible decisions she can't stand, that's not one of those two things. She's going to have to suck it up.
Yeah. And vice versa.
See, Pastor Wilson, why women might.
Finally, we get the answer. The simple, yeah. Well, why did it take that long? This is Mr. Christian Biblical Patriarchy. How did it take that long to get to, yeah? Cenk had to rephrase it twice. Finally. Yeah. Okay. All right. We got there. It took a while.
I not want to live in that society?
Yeah, but vice versa. I can also see why a man might not want to live with a wife who's being terrible. So what you do is you teach people, you counsel them, you try. I'm a pastor. This is a big chunk of what I try to do is I try to help people who are unable to get along. I want to teach them how they can get along, how they can learn to confess their sins and humble themselves and work through this. And sometimes it doesn't work, it doesn't take, and the whole thing crashes. And it's a tragedy when it does. And there are situations where our pastoral team has decided that this is no longer tenable, and we give one of the spouses permission to move out of range.
So, you've mentioned a couple of times, the wedding ceremonies and give count.
So he says, yeah, same for the men. The men would have to stay with a wife that she's horrible as well. And yeah, that might be why many men are choosing not to get married because the ways the laws are structured, if he does decide, boy, I can't take this anymore. This woman is irredeemable. And then he'll get slaughtered in divorce and family court. Anyway, we all know that deal. Let's go on.
Household to folks in your church.
Let me fast forward here a bit.
There are people in our church who have been disciplined for leaving their wives. Right? We are a church that practices church discipline, but we don't practice church discipline because someone doesn't like my preaching anymore. We practice church discipline if someone's caught embezzling at the bank and won't repent, or if someone left their wife and won't come back, or if someone is abusing their children and defends it.
Now, notice when Doug, this is interesting, and that's why I would say, Doug, I think it's clear he has a pretty femme-centric mindset. When he goes to cases for church discipline, the first thing that pops into his mind is we have disciplined men who have left their wives. Now that we take that seriously. Now, do we discipline the women who are rebellious towards their husbands? Well, that one was, I mean, maybe his church does. That's not named, though, and that will never be named, right? Because that is something that we would never talk about. I doubt his church would practice that, because then probably half of his church would be under church discipline. but, but we'll notice that the first thing that comes to God's mind is a man who leaves his wife. Now, how often does that happen? Probably not very often. And I would say for the cases where that does happen, I would ask, I really would want to know what would cause a man to leave his wife. I don't know any men personally, none, nada, zilch, who have left a good woman. A woman who was good and sweet and submitted to them and tried to be as best as she could a helper to her husband. I don't know any. I've never met this man before. Now, they may, if they're a dirtbag, they may step out on them and cheat on them and things like that, but they still come home. They don't leave the woman that's actually a good, sweet helper to them. They don't do that. I've never experienced that. I'm sure that guy probably exists somewhere. Just never met him. Never met that guy.
We would discipline for that sort of thing, and we would excommunicate them and unapologetically excommunicate them. But we have never, ever disciplined anyone or shunned anyone because they decided to go to another church.
Okay, so yeah, I'm not a religious person, let alone in this type of organization. So help me understand, what does it mean to be disciplined in that context like that?
Well, it certainly doesn't mean that a husband would spank his wife. We know that. Okay, that's not what it means.
Is they're no longer given access to the Lord's Supper. So at the conclusion of every worship service, we have the Eucharist, or the Lord's Supper. We serve the bread of the bread, which represents the body of Christ, and the wine, which represents the blood of Christ, and everyone communes and partakes of the bread and wine. If someone is excommunicated, that means they are barred from the table. They are still welcome to come to the church. They're welcome to sing. They're welcome to sit and listen to the sermon. But the one thing they don't get is the Lord's Supper.
Okay, so that's a way of saying you've done something wrong here, and the rest of us are outing you in this very important part of our culture.
Correct.
And then who gets to decide if they've done something wrong enough?
The board of elders. So we have elders that are elected by the congregation, and sometimes the person is excommunicated and the facts of the case are not disputed. Let's say a man ditches his family and runs away with the secretary.
Here we go again with this example. Why is this always the example? Let's see a man ditches his family and runs off. How many men are really that charismatic, are really that persuasive that they ditch their wives and their family, their wife and their family for their secretary? Is this really happening in 2025? I don't know a single guy that's ever done this. Like, who is doing this? This guy must be a real Chad if he can pull that off. I mean, most guys I know, they were lucky to get the one woman that they've got. They were darn lucky to get her. She was the first woman that ever paid attention to him, and so he married her. That's the standard I see over and over and over and over again. Where are these guys that are just like, man, they're so charismatic and good looking, they just seduce the secretary, bingo, bango, leaving the family, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's the old trope. I don't know if I've ever met one of these guys really, face to face in real life. I don't know if I've ever met one of these guys. Can't think of any.
And he doesn't contest it. We would simply proceed to excommunication. But if the facts of the case were contested, if someone said, this guy ripped me off in a business deal, and the man said, no, I didn't, then we would hold a trial. We would hear both sides, and they would have time to prepare their case, and the elders would listen to the evidence presented and then would decide whether he had done that or not. So if it's contested, there'd be a trial. If it's uncontested, there would simply be discipline by a vote of the elders.
I'm genuinely fascinated by this, and I don't know any of it. So, is a woman, a wife, disobeying her husband potentially an issue you could get sanctioned for?
Yes. Ah, yes. Yes. I need to know the answer to this question. Yes. Doug, the vow that this woman took before God and man, she took this vow. You said it. This vow that she took to obey her husband. This is a vow. Is that okay? Do you really discipline for this vow that this wife has taken to obey her husband for all her days? Is that something serious enough that we would discipline for? Doug, please tell us. Doug, please tell us here, please. Let's hear it.
It would depend on what she was disobeying him over, but if he wanted her to serve him taco salad tonight and she didn't do it, then no, you would never. That would never rise to an excommunicable offense. No.
Okay, there's the conclusion. No, we do not hold women, wives accountable for the vows that we make them take during the marriage ceremony. No, we do not do that. She vowed it. Cenk, great question. Great question. Mr. Biblical Patriarchy. Great question. Do you discipline for this, Doug? No, we do not. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is the state of Christian biblical patriarchy in America today. Do we need any more evidence?
But some things could. Like, again, I don't know it at all. So, like, what would be an offense that's near the line but is over it? And it would.
Oh, now Cenk, he keeps pressing. Please, Pastor Doug. The wife has vowed that she will obey her husband before God and man. Please, what would be over the line of obedience? What would be it? Okay, Doug, here we go. Offering up softball. Boom, give us something, please. Please.
Let's say radical neglect of the children, let's say.
Okay, then you get excommunicated, or maybe radical disagreement with the husband, like disobeying of the husband.
Well, it would depend again over what. If he was saying, "I'd like you to feed the children. I'd like you to not take them to the wild parties where they have to, navigate the drug addicts on the floor." If that's what he told her and she's ignoring him, then yeah, she could be disciplined, but it would be high level 10 Commandments stuff.
So Cenk again tries to get an answer. Cenk, this is Mr. Biblical Christian Patriarchy. Cenk again. So what would be Doug? So Doug, he asked him, what is the case that we would say, yes, the wife disobeyed the husband? Okay. If she neglected the children so badly that they were in harm's way, then and only then would we put her under church discipline. No, if she did that, Doug, she would be in jail. She wouldn't be under church discipline. If you neglect your children such as that, you will be in jail. You can't do that. Forget about church discipline. Your wife's going to jail. She's not going to presbytery discipline court. Oh my goodness. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the state of Christian patriarchy.
When we discipline someone, it's not over taking the pastor's wife's parking spot. It's not over trivial stuff. It's over 10 Commandments issues, murder, theft, adultery, etc.
Okay, I understand.
just wrap up with that final thought. This is, and I like Doug Wilson. I like Doug Wilson. I like the stuff he puts out, the Canon Press, all that stuff. I like that stuff. I'm just telling you, when Doug is put on the stand by someone interviewing him, who I'll give it to the Young Turks, Cenk. He did a fairly good job interviewing him. It didn't seem like he was trying to do a lot of gotcha things. I think he was, you know, questioning in fairly good faith, and obviously probably not that good faith, but it seemed like he was fairly good faith, questioning Doug's, getting his side of the story, blah blah blah. It was a fairly decent interview. When he puts him on the stand, should a wife obey her husband? No, that wasn't even the question. Should a wife even listen to her husband? Should a wife obey? Should a wife obey a failing husband? One that's just not that great at being a husband. Should your church, or does your church, discipline a wife who doesn't obey her husband, even though she vowed to obey her husband before God and man? She vowed this before God. One of the few things that we actually vow to do. That's one of the few. I mean, the husband vows having a whole blah blah blah. That's one of the few vows I've taken. I don't think that's the only thing I've ever vowed in my life, was at my marriage ceremony. I don't think I've ever vowed anything else in my life before. Do we hold a wife accountable for that vow that she took in your church? Not all churches do that, but in your church, she vows to obey. What's the answer? No, we don't. That's the answer. Boy, it's a sad state. I like Doug, but we got to get this turned around. And we are getting it turned around because Christ is winning. He is building his church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Until next time, this is the Post Millennial Man.